make life a simple song. Oh.
Hello, it's Lauren here. See if I can get my camera unfuzzied. There we are. Welcome to today's contemplative rose practice. I'm Lauren, and I want to share a bit of wisdom from the Christian lineage, that mystic lineage that I kind of really hold dear to my heart, not only as I seek to sort of reclaim a spiritual or religious tradition that feels resonant to my own life and the life of my family, not having grown up in an overtly religious family. I'm probably one of the more I don't know, spiritual woo or spiritual junkies or religious junkies out of all of them that I know. So I love to explore all paths and practices, and at the same time feel the importance and necessity of simplifying spiritual life. And that I feel comes from embracing tradition that feels just resonant in my own being. And I think we're all on this path to finding God on our own terms and uniting in the joy of our devotion to God, regardless of its rituals, its ceremony, its beliefs, its concepts, its openness to mystery, all of that. It's beautiful, and we're coming together in a really more expansive place in our soul's evolution if we can come together in this seeking and allowing others to have their own path or even no path. So I used to have this saying that was stenciled on the wall in my home. It was a scripture from the the Bible that was called like "Be still." It says, "Be still and know that I am God." And I love that because as a lifelong meditator, it felt like an embodied truth for me. When I got still and quiet, I really knew the presence of God. And that really informed my own gnosis, this inner wisdom, and sort of the beacon for what is truth and what is sort of delusion or distortion. And so, and that doesn't mean that I have all the answers or even need to know. I think it also allowed me to hold the paradoxes without needing to take one side, a particular stance, to be able to sit in neutrality, to allow others to simply have their unfolding spiritual path. I think this is where we're really being guided to, even though there is a lot of polarization right now, especially like in the world of women's spirituality, women moving from, say, one end of the spectrum to the other or vice versa, and then pointing at the other side where they had just come from and saying, no, you're wrong, and no, you're wrong. I'm not sure how this really serves us or if we've really learned anything along the way. So I'm just going to say it as it is. There's some work for us to do. So again, regardless of your place in your religious or spiritual views, this is a place for us to simply get curious, to kind of mull things out, but from a contemplative perspective or attitude, which really draws our awareness inwards. So anything that feels like a separation or distinction from our own truth, turn that inwards versus pointing the finger. And not that it needs to change any perspective that you have, but can it allow you to meet the other person with a greater capacity for openness, understanding, empathy, love, and just allowance? Allowing everyone to be where they're at, trusting that divine timing will lead them to where their soul needs to be in its revealing. We all desire to illuminate our soul, right? Like it's a refinement process. And if we find a path that works for us, even if it has some black and white doctrine or ideology, or if it's, in the untethering from religious oppression, which is real and true for some, regardless, we're walking the path we're meant to be in this moment. Can we just allow that and love one another in that? So, in a relationship with God, however you meet that, can we begin to cultivate and develop just a better understanding of who God is in our lives? And I think that's what's most important. Like, let's not worry so much about out here, but how is God refining your life? And so for me, to be still and know holds great wisdom. And it is a practice, a discipline that has been enacted as protocol for soul expansion across all traditions and timelines. So I think I liken this phrase, this scripture, to that of a yoga practice, one that I think most of us here can appreciate. It's such a social norm now to be in a yoga practice, even though the concept of yoga in the West is very much not what the traditional practice is, because the real meaning of yoga is to yoke, meaning to come into divine union with the one. So we bring ourselves into awareness and into unity with the one. And then, the stillness becomes an intention. It can become a path to know more of God, if we could ever, and if we endeavor in that. And I don't know that that's even necessary. I love the idea of letting God be the mystery, that to think we could even conceptualize God, I think holds a rather important notion. And as someone that follows a more Christian mystic path, I feel there's an importance of holding both the immanence and transcendence as two very different textures. Because for me, in my life, God can be in here, but there's times when I need God out here, something that is so big, so vast, powerful beyond measure or beyond my imagination, that can intercede in my life in ways that I couldn't even fathom. That kind of transcendent God feels important in my life. And so I can get to know that God And then I can also get to know this presence that's within me as well. And so, stillness as a point of knowing and unifying with God isn't just necessarily about sitting still, it's about getting still, even in our movement. And so, as a yoga practice, our movements can be like a mindful movement that lead into a stillness, which leads us into that like meditative and then that union with God. And so the movement, in a sense, is a means to the stillness within the movement is a means to the union with God. And so that's the practice of yoking, which just invites us into this experience of the divine, into having an encounter with the divine, which feels important in the mystic path for sure, right? Because the mystic is one that experiences the divine in all of life, in the doing, in the quieting, in the stillness, in conversation with our friends, with our family. It's an encounter of the divine presence at any moment. It's a feeling, it's an experience, it's an embodied experience, a knowing or a gnosis. And so, just resting for a moment on this concept of stillness. Because we cultivate this contemplative attitude from this slowing down, this stillness. This is what allows us to be yoked more readily. Slowing down can also mean, or being still can also mean the quality of emptying, kenosis. And this experience we can also draw from a practice of fasting. When we take something out of our lives that we are in habitual attendance to, whether it's eating food or scrolling on social media, even driving a car. The things that we do that are really on the like material plane that connect us to this physical vessel. When we detach from those things for a period of time, whether it's for a day or for a week or longer, there's a real shift in our ability to become still. And all of a sudden, our awareness becomes very heightened because our attention is drawn inwards. The ego really fights. The ego comes into contention with this withdrawing, this denial. And what's beautiful about this practice, it is also a practice that invites us to yoke with the divine. Because to fight our ego's attachment requires divine intervention or leaning into the divine strength, divine compassion, grace, mercy. And so we lean in and merge the divine. And it's so interesting what happens when we do this, because our vessel sort of opens and expands to allow more light, that divine Christed light, the Christos, to enter in. And what happens often through this purification practice of fasting is that time slows down. there's this stilling, this quieting that happens when we really lean in, when we start to merge. We can come into these moments of samadhi too when we're fasting, because we're leaning so heavily into this divine presence for our strength. And beautiful things can come out of that as well, like clarity and focus. We become a clear channel. Decisions that we have to make that are hard and challenging become maybe more clear, easier to make. Divine encounter, obviously. That mystical state, in a sense, where we are open beyond, like to a noticing and open to an awareness beyond the physical level, but like the subtle anatomy, those other layers of our being, because our mental body, our emotional body, spiritual, energetic body are all getting cleansed and purified. There's a perception change. There's an attitude change. There's a softening. Anytime there's refinement happening, just like a stone in a river, you know, the river stones that are really smooth, that's refinement. And so when we are in a practice of yoking, there's also this softening, smoothing around these aspects of our being that allows us to come into our own self-witnessing and into relationship with others and with the world with a capacity of compassion and empathy and support and kindness, those things that are soft, because we are soft. So we come at life with a greater softness, lightness. Let me give an example of how, well, this is going back to the idea of westernized yoga and how we're kind of really missing the beauty of the practice when we're only focused on the physical. That's why spiritual fasting or spiritual practices like meditation are so vital to our spiritual development. And yes, okay, if you want your yoga practice to just be for the physical, it can be. But I recall a time after a yoga workshop where there were people waiting in the lobby for the next class, and we had just finished a yoga class that had combined with Reiki, and so people were lingering. It was slow to get up and kind of back into your physical body. And I had heard later that some of the people who were waiting to get into their class, which wasn't behind, they just wanted to get into their space and get their spot, they were a little disgruntled. They were impatient, waiting to get into their yoga class. And I was like, something just seems amiss here. They're missing a part of their practice. They could have been waiting, patiently observing, becoming mindful, witnessing themselves. But that's not the yoga they're practicing. And so, anyway, I just thought it was really funny that we kind of miss the point, and that oftentimes even our spiritual practices can look like the grind, the everyday grind that we're in. Like, let's just get there, get it done, and move on to the next thing. That is not the cultivation of a contemplative attitude. So where are the fruits of the practice if we're just agitated because we're not getting on the mat quick enough? Where is it refining your response in life? if you're agitated in a yoga class? And is there an essence that's missing from the yoga that can intercede in the agitation, in the impatience, in the frustration, in the grind? And that's why, for me, putting God in the center of our lives is really vital. I'll go on a limb and say vital for everyone, because we miss these things. Our ego is so profound and tricky and sneaky that for me to lean in on what is divine purity, strength, comfort, all of the benevolent qualities of divine presence that we need in our lives, we can lean into that essence, that force, whatever it is, to help transform and alchemize the things that we need smoothed out. Let God be the waters over the river stones to soften, to smooth our rough edges. There's another way we can look at yoking, and it's one from the Bible that has, to me, very, very similar framework. And so it's the verse, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden." So just like those yogis in the waiting room, we're the same. We are impatient. We've got things to do. We've got a lot we're carrying on our shoulders. We just want to get that quick fix of relaxation, then move on and get the rest of the things checked off. We're all heavy laden. We're burdened with a lot in our lives. So come to me, all of you who labor and are heavy laden. That's all of us. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So this is an invitation, and when this passage talks about the yoke, they're talking about this tool. It's the best way I could say it. It's a tool that farmers used to attach two, like, yaks or cows or cattle, whatever you want to call them, together side by side. It hooked them in together. It's kind of like a tandem bicycle. Imagine that. Like there's an instrument that joins two people together, or two beings together. So he's saying, take my yoke upon you. So he's like, God's like, take my yoke. Come into my comforting, strong arms, and I will give you rest. Like, this yoke doesn't really need to be not too tough a love. It's not too uncomfortable. But when we receive it, we're guided, almost, with a sense of ease. Different from when we try to guide ourselves through life. Oh gosh, can't tell you how many conversations do I have to have. How many conversations do I have to have with myself, with other people, paying for mentors to give me the wisdom, the guidance, the stepping stones to the next thing? That's a lot of efforting. When we could just take this easier yoke and walk in divine guidance. And that yoke allows us to cultivate an ability to be in divine timing as well. So it softens our impatience, maybe our need to like have all the things laid out before us. Like we need all the steps. Like if this is my goal is Z, I have to lay out A, B, C, D, all the whole alphabet. So I know how it's going to work out. And we know that why we resist the yoke is because the yoke doesn't show us the path from A to Z. That's like the divine mystery that we're invited into. And then we don't have to work so hard getting from A to Z. You may not feel this or resonate with it or believe it, but it's something we can get curious about and even try on. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. And that's from Matthew 11, verse 28 to 30. And so another layer of this yoking actually comes from the Taoist lineage and teachings of the Wu Wei, which means effortless action. So how can we live in our lives that allows for this effortless action? So we're still participating, we're still taking the action steps necessary for our daily lives, but we're not gripping, we're not pushing, we're not grinding through, we're not forcing, we're not controlling. That's a lot of efforting. And when we do life that way, we're not in this quality of yoking with the divine. And so we're invited into this Wu Wei, which is more of a natural flow. It's really turning on the sacred feminine or the divine feminine, because we're not forcing outcomes. We're allowing ourselves to be in this flow of the unfolding of life, which also cultivates this quality of stillness. When we take this yoke, when we allow for the flow, the divine flow in our lives, there's an essence of stillness that settles into our being. It allows, there's this greater spaciousness to be in maybe even a quality of peace around the outcomes and the steps needed or wanted in our life. And so the Taoists also say that stillness is the greatest revelation. The greatest revelation is stillness. Be still and know that I am God. So which path do we take? Because if we're yoking, this means we are noticing there are two distinct parts to the equation. We can take our path, the part of ourselves, self-orientation, or we can, another path is just like this, God is over here and there's this full surrendering and we're just not really engaged. When we yoke, there's this relationship this merging, this intimacy. I mean, I'm sorry, if I'm yoked to like a sister next to me, we're going to get to know each other. There is true intimacy going on. There is this merging. And this yoking is an experience that brings us into divine union. There might be one more thing I want to read about this, because I think this is good too, and this helps us deepen into what Yeshua is really inviting us into around this yoking, is that he invites us to unite our attention and awareness fully with the divine in the experience of Christ consciousness. So Christ consciousness is the language that we can all be very comfortable with. And it's through that Christ consciousness that we experience peace. Because Yeshua is the Prince of Peace and offers us a path to personal and collective peace. This is Yeshua's divine promise to us. All we must do is follow his teachings and surrender into God's grace. And so God's grace comes when we yoke. If you're not really going to take up the yoke, we might miss where God's grace is really moving us in life. There's this beautiful, beautiful way of going through life when we are in divine collaboration, in relationship, when we have the fullness of the awe and wonder and mystery of this powerful intervening force of nature, that we can also hold in the intimacy of our own body temple through gnosis, this inner wisdom. It's bringing ourselves into this space of union or yoking. And so why don't we just enter into a little stillness? That was a lot of chatter. And so the invitation here is to be still and know. So invite yourself to get into a comfortable position, whether you're standing, seated, or lying down, and soften the eyelids closed. I'm going to invite you to bring your thinking mind downwards into your body, towards your heart, into the larger vessel or container of your body, this torso area. With the breath in, inviting the mind down into the heart, to the belly, to the womb. Allowing the fullness or wholeness of your being to be still and know. And so as we sit in this stillness, what is the knowing that is being revealed to you? And enter into the stillness with the Wei Wu quality of effortless action. So we are aware with a quality of ease. So we're not striving or reaching for anything. We're just allowing ourselves to be aware in the stillness of our being. Maybe noticing the breaths as they come in and out, feeling the body expand and contract, just soft awareness as we enter into silence. And we'll stay here for a few minutes. I'll bring you back with the chime of the bell. Taking a deeper breath in, just noticing how you feel. And gradually opening the eyes. If you like this practice and want to learn more about cultivating a contemplative attitude, you can reach out and join us for the Contemplative Rose Path. Much love.